We're still in conversation with governance expert TK Bowe. TK, the all-important question, what kind of leadership should emerge at this conference?
I like that question because it tells us how we should think about it. I understand that there are 6 names there, but I think what you're asking is what about the 60 million? What should they expect? And
yes.
I always say, look, what's the problems that the country's facing? Because once you define the problem properly, then you can actually go to the characteristic of it. And in that regard, I think, look, the economy is front and center. And not that you're going to speak about the economy, but you're actually going to come up with policies and actually direction about which ways the South African economy is going. We know that, look, on one hand, we've got a very sophisticated financial services sector, but then there's another end where we've got a lot of people who might not have those BCom in finance or ICT, but I think could be put to work in different areas. Now, can you bridge the gap? And obviously, what you always stress, the issue of governance. Can you actually get people into departments and municipalities that actually, A, want to work for the country, work for the community, and actually have got the expertise to do that? And in this regard, I think the leadership here, and I have to say this, bar maybe the Secretary General position, is a bit lacking. Not to say that they are, oh my word, that they are bad, but it's an issue of saying, what can you do in 20 years? Because a lot of them have served in the NEC for a perpetual long time. What can you do? What can you do in the next coming 10 years which you could not do then? And in this regard, I think it's a bit lacking. And also, as I say, it points to the fact that why have we not actually thought about what comes next? Any modern political party's big question is not so much that are we going to win elections, but are we going to be able to put our best foot forward? And putting our best foot forward in political terms is, can we give an offering where people say, oh, wow, you know what, there's Mfundo there who really does understand what's happening when it comes to ICT communication.
I love what you say there, because Thabo Mbeki, in one address a bit earlier in the year, spoke about that it seems the ANC is preoccupied with leadership far too often, as opposed to dealing with why exactly they exist, which is to serve. You find that they're just on this mill, just discussing leadership the whole time. Yes,
and once you only discuss leadership and you don't do leadership, you're basically no different than, look, some people who are just think, one might say, how do you put it, you're just smoking a pipe. There's nothing really different you're doing. And I think that's where this generation of the ANC has missed it. That, look, it can no longer be always that, look, when they speak about leadership, and I'm sure you've seen it, they always say, oh, Tambo, Nelson Mandela, Thabo Mbeki. So then the question I ask is, well, then what are you doing? Because this issue of saying, but no, we always have to refer back. Look, they are the past. What is the future? And I think the ANC has not invested enough in the future. And the debate normally goes, oh, then are you saying that we must get rid of all people? Again, that misses the point. Leadership, and I always say, it's not an age thing.
Yes.
And I always say, there's a movie, James Bond, where the new Q meets the new James Bond. He says, look, youth is not a guarantee of innovation, as old age is not a guarantee of wisdom. So what we're saying is cut the middle, which is to say, can you get the best person in the ANC to do this? And I'm reminded of a colleague of mine, Professor William Gumede at the Wits School of Governance. He actually said, there's parties in the world that have shown you that it is possible to be an old party and actually go into a new way of thinking. And I wrote an article which says, if the ANC is really serious about leadership, then actually start to ask, look, we understand that we have to look after our members, which is fine, but can we not maybe get 10 or 12 different people from outside the ANC who really get leadership, either in business or in communities, and bring them in?
If we look at the past of the ANC, it seems they've, to a certain extent over the years, alienated these institutions. If you have the community of technocrats outside of the ANC, they've never been completely welcomed. We have seen a bit of a difference now with the current president, but then some people went on to criticize him and say the country is over-workshopped, over-consulted, over-imbizoed. They don't want imbizos anymore, they want action. So which one is it? Should they continue to consult widely and bring in some of those technocrats from the private sector, or what exactly should they do?
I think they should do what they used to do in the past. If you look at who served as I think one of the second Minister of Science and Technology, he was the president of AZAPO. And he actually set up a very brilliant department. The Department of Science and Innovation is one of the best run departments in the country, period. So why don't you go there and say, look for that type of person? And I always say this about the weirdest thing about the ANC is your normal rank and file ANC members are also in the private sector. So it's not to say that you have to get people who are not always not ANC. Look what's within. Make the environment open so that people can say, listen, can I get a fair shot at coming to a place like Nasrec, get an NEC position, and if maybe you guys want me to be a minister or a DG, so be it.
No,
there
but
are
they say
people.
the intellectuals have been alienated.
Well,
they say they've been pushed to the side.
And that's the sad thing.
Politics comes first. So if you're a person that's able to work the ground, as some say, then you're somebody that would be elevated over somebody who is actually competent at times. A culture they possibly need to do away with.
And it's a weird thing. It's a more I'd say post-90s resolution, because if you look at the early founders of the ANC, there were people based in the community, were leaders. When you speak about Chief Albert Lutuli, when you speak about Dr. Pixie Kaseme, these were people who were great in their own regard, and we must never forget that. Great in their own regard, but they saw there was something wrong with society. So the question is, I'm not saying we create a new culture, I'm simply saying return back to what made the ANC, which is great individuals in the different industries being brought together to actually build and actually work on what's wrong with the country. So it's return back to what you were. I'm not saying create anything new, just go back to what you were.
Now, in the president's political report, he spoke about poor voter turnout. He took us through 2014. It was, I believe, at 73%, and then in 2019 it went to 66%. Very concerning. But in his report, he went on to commit that they're going to have some sort of a program that will even involve society at large to try and bring back the younger voter. But is it really that you need to start with a program, or you perhaps need to start with diagnosing that which has led them to stay home?
Well, I think what we said earlier on, it's almost about saying, first just implement, guys. Can you make sure that when I walk out of my street, the municipality, and especially rural South African municipalities, because that's where the ANC really is at the moment, can you make that work? Two, can you actually get industry to come to places like Mahike and Bovembe district and places like Bogugulet? Well, I guess that's a bit of a weird one, but in those places, can you make them come to there? When you do that, I know that you are serious. But to
and
put
we'll
me
go
in,
to the polls, we'll go to the stations.
Without a doubt. But when you want to tell me you have another discussion, I'm like, what are we going to discuss which is new that we all don't know?
Because it will actually, that diagnosis, like you say, will lead them back to service delivery and better governance.
And that's all people are asking for. I always say South Africans are actually very, I'd say, mild-mannered in terms of the things we want. We put up with a lot of nonsense, but what people really want is to say, listen, like I said, when I get out of my home, when you know, many parents are paying for their kids to go to school, is there something at the end of it? And two, can you actually live in a country which is safe if you're a woman? And I don't think people are asking for a lot. We're not asking to say, look, when you look at other more advanced countries where the debates are a bit more sophisticated, we're not even at that level yet. We're simply saying, can you make sure that what we have works? And from that basis, allow the next generation of individuals to take this country to a higher and a better place.
And I mean, with criminals, they've become more brazen. I couldn't believe that we had individuals that went to rob hawkers of their chicken feet and then came back when they were stoned. They came back a bit later to then randomly shoot at everybody. That to me said they knew exactly that there would be no police that would respond to that incident on time, either because they are dejected or, more importantly, they don't have the resources. They're dealing with one bucky. You see how criminals have studied and really seen government's shortcomings, and they're able to attempt to rob you and then come back a bit later and kill you.
Well, I had the pleasure of speaking to a few police men and women here that are serving, and what you're saying is what many of them cry about. Just that ability to say, listen, we feel as, imagine if law enforcement can do law enforcement, you know as a country you're getting it wrong. But then it goes back to the same issue of saying, if we're in that situation, and everybody knows it, why are you not investing properly into that? Because the hallmarks of any state, a proper state, is you've got firm borders which you can control, because if you don't have that, you're not a country. Two, law enforcement works for everyone. Regardless of whether you're rich or poor, law enforcement will be there for you. But if that is unearthed, then basically you're no longer running a country. You're running one might say, it's a quasi-operation with no leadership. And that for me would be the worst. It is the worst thing that's happening for many people. Because I think what always makes me sad is we always speak about the stories we report. Think about people who simply say, listen, what's the point in reporting? And I think this is always the case when it comes to issues such as rape, where women say, what is the point? And once you can no longer give them that reassurance, ladies and gentlemen, we're in what's basic. We're beyond the third world. We're simply not a country at all.
It's honestly a very dismal picture, because now it's led to the commodification of basic services, such as being protected, because many people now rely on their private security. If you're getting robbed, the first people you probably call is your private security, because you've also got your panic button, as opposed to going to a police station that should be functioning.
Yes, we're actually working on a paper with a colleague of mine, which is to say we're actually going to try to quantify what is the price which individuals pay for poor governance. think about it. You talk about private security. It's not like everyone wants to go live in an estate. You speak about private healthcare. The only reasons why South Africans pay a lot of extra is because the state has failed.
Yeah.
And that for me is quite problematic, because you can just imagine, how do you build wealth for the next generation if a lot of your money is going towards having to do the things which the state is failing to do? And I think there's...
Courier services. I mean, why should we be going to them when we have the post office? But it's dysfunctional. You will not get your parcel on time.
And I think there's also a question about times have moved on. And I believe the post office, if given the proper leadership, can actually do what a lot of these private courier companies are doing. So again, it's that issue of, are we thinking about what's coming next? Because I know it's good to dwell on the past, but what you need for a modern political party, which I argue the ANC is not, is that they need to really understand that, listen, modernity is here. Face it or you will perish. And we only have to look at examples of other former liberation movements like in Zambia and across the continent, who they perished not because their ideals were wrong, but simply they just did not understand modernity.
And like you say, it's not about age, it's about innovation that can come from either the old or the young. TK, we'll leave it there for now. That's governance expert TK Bowe. We're still coming to you live from Nasrec at the ANC's 55th National Conference. More news on the other side. Do stay with us.